Welcome to Embracing Autism IRL. Today, I'm joined by Dr. Judith Orloff, a New York Times bestselling author, psychiatrist, and empath whose work has been featured everywhere from The Today Show and Oprah Magazine to the New York Times. Dr. Orloff has written several groundbreaking books on empathy and sensitivity, and she's here today to talk about her brand new children's book, The Highly Sensitive Rabbit. This story follows Aurora, a sweet and sensitive rabbit who learns to see her sensitivity not as something to be ashamed of, but as a beautiful gift. As a mom to autistic kids myself, I know so many parents listening have kids who've been called too sensitive in a negative way. So today we're exploring how to flip that narrative, empower our sensitive kiddos, and help them embrace their strengths. Today, this conversation is made possible by the Highly Sensitive Rabbit and Dr. Judith Orloff. So, without further ado, I would love to have you on our show today. Welcome, Dr. Orloff.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here.
And am I pronouncing that right? Is it Orloff?
Perfect.
Okay, great. So let's start out learning a little bit more about you and the story behind the book here. So what inspired you to write The Highly Sensitive Rabbit?
I was a sensitive child, a very highly sensitive child myself. And I had a number of difficulties growing up in terms of people calling me overly sensitive, my mother telling me to get a thicker skin and not feeling like I belonged anywhere. And I couldn't find other people like me. So it was, I grew up that way. And I felt a lot of shame about being sensitive and intuitive and open. So I wanted to write and I've been on my healing path since then, in terms of integrating, my sensitivities into my whole being, and certainly as a psychiatrist now. And so I wanted to write a book to help children with the shame about being overly sensitive and to tell them it's okay. You're not overly sensitive. These are just people who don't get it. And there are plenty of people who can identify with you. And I went through it myself, and I still, it's being a highly sensitive person is a little bit different than other people because there's so much coming at you that you need to deal with and learn how to center yourself and not be bowled over by everything. And the gifts of being highly sensitive are just numerous. Intuition, loving heart, connection to animals, love of nature, all kinds of beautiful gifts. And so I wanted to write The Highly Sensitive Rabbit to show how Aurora went through her difficulties and then met other beautiful animals, some of them considered different themselves, who helped her learn strategies on how to deal with their sensitivities and have friends and still be able to be by herself when she wanted to be and just look at the moon. Like the cover of the book is Aurora on Earth looking up at the moon.
I feel like this is personally relatable because I was that child too, where everyone was always like, oh, you're just too sensitive. You're just too sensitive. And I remember kind of learning and internalizing that and just being like, this is a bad thing. Like, apparently, it's not good to be overly sensitive. And it took me going through it as an adult to realize that it's actually really a gift because you're able to do so much more for others and you're able to see things that other people don't see. Like, you're kind of like the first to react. Have you experienced that?
Oh, definitely. I mean, we definitely know how to read a room and can feel it. And yes, it's something very special, and it's something that we need to honor and cherish. But we feel so much more. It's like holding something with 5 fingers, but feeling it like you have 50 fingers. Know that you just have this increased sensitivity towards what happens in your body, what happens in the energy outside in rooms with people. And so it really helps you to look at what's important in life and finding good heart-centered people to be around versus, those who might not understand. That's very important. And that's what Aurora did. She found other animals that she could relate to and who could guide her in terms of how to deal with their sensitivities. And so many times sensitive children go off on their own and they isolate because everything gets to be too much. And one of the messages in the book is that we have friends, we have people who can understand us, we have animals who could understand us, and that we need to find that select group so we can have that support and realize there's nothing wrong with you. That's kind of mind-blowing. I get so many emails from people saying, I just discovered I'm a highly sensitive person or an empath, and it's just a revelation. My life has opened up. Before this, I thought I was, psychotic, or I thought I was anxious or depressed or whatever. And, it's freeing to find out who you really are and then begin to live your life in accordance with that, honoring that. So that's what I want the book to be for children, as a support and helping them to love themselves and not go through, some of the torment that many of us went through because we had no one to connect to.
Yeah, I have one of my kids. So both of my kids are autistic. They're 6 and 7, and one of them also has that like PDA profile, but she is very highly sensitive. And even if you say something that's not even a criticism, but like in the realm of like not perfection, she automatically is just like, "Oh, I'm the worst. You don't like me. I'm terrible at this. I'm terrible at that." And she gets so down on herself. So I definitely feel like children like her need to hear or see other kids experiencing that emotional sensitivity, because I feel like it goes two ways. Like it's sensitivity outwardly, but it's also like sensitivity as your own feelings that you're feeling very extreme, or like does that make sense? Am I explaining
Yeah.
that okay?
Yes, no, you're getting it exactly. And your daughter, it's an example, everyone beats themselves up. It's not just her. And so she needs to know that this is just what human beings do. And growing and, coming to love oneself, you beat yourself up less, so there's less of that. And you can get a positive inner dialogue and not let that old tape of I'm not good enough and I did this so poorly and I don't measure up and all that, you learn to put something else there saying, I did my best in this situation. It was fine. It was wonderful. So you learn to reprogram yourself. That's part of healing as a highly sensitive child who's, has issues to deal with. But everybody has issues to deal with. So whether they deal with them or not, I don't know. But, what I'm asking people to do is to, with this highly sensitive rabbit, is to address what's going on inside if you're highly sensitive and consider embracing it and seeing it as just a wonderful thing. And if you come down on yourself at times, try to be compassionate and empathic with yourself, saying it's okay. It's all okay. I'm going to try and love myself. And you begin to talk to yourself that way. Now, rather than beat, which is, very common, what goes on in people's heads. I've sat across from people for so many years. I know what goes on in a lot of their heads because they just are very hard on themselves, So
Yeah. I've often heard that basically a child's outer voice, like who they hear, kind of becomes their inner voice as they become an adult, and kind of like their inner child's voice. So I'm wondering, a lot of times, a lot of adults label these kiddos as overly sensitive, and there is this negative connotation that is attached to it that always feels shaming. Why do you think that's the case?
they have a different model of what's a powerful, healthy being. They see someone as being tough and able to defend themselves and, not crying a lot and not showing a lot of emotion as the ideal, or staying in the head rather than being in the body. That's the ideal. And that's not the paradigm for an empowered, highly sensitive person, especially a child. That's not our goal. Our goal is to come from our hearts and to learn how to balance the head and the heart. It's not about cutting off anything or becoming tough and strong and not feeling anything, that old macho idea, which is so, old and outmoded. Yeah, it's about being a good person. It's about being a loving person. And it's about being a sensitive person, realizing that you may go into a room and feel so much more than other people. No, that may be true, but you have to learn not to take on the stress and suffering of other people. And that's another theme in the book that I wanted to get across, is that, you can care for people without trying to fix them, without trying to heal every wounded animal or human on the planet. I want to do that. I want to heal everybody, but I can't. And I do my best. I stay in my lane. I make my contribution. And it's very rewarding, but there's a limit. You have to realize there's a limit. And I think so many sensitive people, their hearts are so big. And the children, they listen to their parents suffer. I've seen this, that the parents are going through suffering and the child becomes the therapist because they're so sensitive and empathic. And that's not healthy either. The parents need to deal with their stuff, and the child should be a child. But unfortunately, because they're so caring and they'll look at you and take your hand and, and it's really a beautiful thing that they're so caring, but you don't want to lay that on a child at a young age. You want, to get your help elsewhere. Have your therapist be someone other than your child. You're highly sensitive and to your child.
Yeah, I've definitely seen that, the parentification of children. It's frustrating, but I can see why some parents kind of slip into that accidentally. So, for my parents out there listening, they might not have heard of the phrase highly sensitive or overly sensitive. What does highly sensitive mean? What does it mean to be highly sensitive? If a parent is trying to figure out if their child qualifies as highly sensitive or not, what would they be looking for?
Mm-hmm. Well, they're very sensitive to noise, smells, excessive talking, or loud noise. The loud noises are, whereas other children might go right by them, noise can go right through the sensitive child and agitate them. It's like a dog, when they're around loud noise. It's the same thing. And smells. If your child, is very sensitive to perfume, if they don't like perfume, if they seem to have a quote overreaction to perfume, it's real. I would not wear perfume around them. I would listen to what they want. And sometimes they don't want to be hugged all the time. They don't want to be touched all the time. And that's okay. People are different. But sometimes when a highly sensitive person or child hugs somebody, they literally feel the energy of the other person. It's not just like blank. They feel the energy and can connect with them. And so it becomes a lot. So oftentimes, my friends who are adults now, but were highly sensitive children, and they're, if they're in a situation where they're running a large group, they tell people they don't want to hug everyone in the long line. It's just too much. And so being able to set boundaries like that is very important. But a highly sensitive child will sometimes want to be alone more than the other children. They don't want to go to big concerts or loud events. Sometimes they're on the stairway overlooking the little party that you're having and they don't want to come down. And that's okay, as they're taking it in their own way. And they might want to have alone time or just stare into space or just be creative and draw. But they don't need to be with people as much as maybe other children do. And parents might get a little concerned about that. But the child has to find their way and find their own tribe. And I think it's important that, they have friends. When I was growing up, I always had one best friend. And, I didn't have like tons of friends. I didn't want tons of friends. It was too much. But I did like having one friend or a couple of friends and going places and climbing trees and playing sports. But I didn't like going to, big events. Or, what other kids like to do. I didn't. And I always felt awkward Like I didn't belong because I was very quiet, extremely quiet person. I'm still very quiet. Like if you lived beneath me, you couldn't hear me walking because I wear socks. Um, no, but I'm just generally a quiet person who goes through the world. I don't make a lot of noise in the and people make a lot of noise. If you're highly sensitive, you realize how noisy they are. But others don't. It doesn't matter if they're noisy or not, or a big boom box goes by. It doesn't matter. They're not absorbing it in the same way. So you want to really look at your child and say, how does my child feel better? How does my child process the world? And don't compare it with other people, or non-highly sensitive people. Just look at the child for him or herself and just find out what they need and help them with strategies like setting boundaries, taking alone time, that I describe in the book, that are really important. It can make a big difference in their lives if they have simple skills to do in moments of stress. Otherwise, they experience what's called sensory overload, where too much is coming at them too fast. And let me tell you, it's a painful experience when sensory overload starts. It happens to me a few times in airports where the plane was late. I had to stay in the airport and there's too much noise. And it's just not one of my comfortable spots in airports. Although I do it, I can do it. But I've learned to take care of myself when I'm there. So, each child has to know what sets them off. The parent needs to know what sets the child off. Why is the child having a tantrum? What happened? Put it, connect the dots. What happened? So you can see in the future, and be prepared, to ward that off, whatever that issue was. And don't judge harshly the child for their reactions. It's very important that you see the reactions as valuable, and maybe they need to learn certain skills to cope better. But this is the authentic reality that the child is expressing. And it's important to say, honey, I hear you. It's empathy is I hear you, I see you. What you say is valuable to me. And when you communicate that to a child, that's really nice. And a highly sensitive child, it will calm them down.
So, one of the things that you mentioned, I honestly relate to it as well, was just kind of like the isolation aspect with like social situations and things like that. And I know, like, for me growing up, I also being, highly sensitive, I wanted to be around the friends. I wanted to go and hang out and go to the parties, but I was overwhelmed by them. And so it feels like it's almost like a older version of parallel play where it's like you want to be around the people and the thing, but you don't necessarily want to engage directly with it because it's too much. So you're kind of on the outskirts of it. Is that anything that you experienced?
Um, well, I coped in a kind of dangerous way when I was a teenager. So I didn't struggle with that so much because I got involved with drugs and alcohol when I was a teenager to try and squash my sensitivities. And so that's how I coped with it at that point. Um, I'm not suggesting that to anyone. It's common though, people do turn to substance abuse. But my parents finally sent me to a psychiatrist who was able to help me see that I needed to integrate this sensitivity and my intuition into my life. And as a part of me, I couldn't run from it and I couldn't be someone other than myself. So I started my healing path then. But at the time when all the teenage parties were going on, I went to them because I was able to numb myself out. Again,
Yeah.
not recommended.
Right. But it makes sense. I mean, especially younger years, that is kind of like what kids do. I wanted to kind of ask you with your story, the main character, Aurora, you mentioned that, she kind of goes through this process of like feeling overwhelmed in the story. What advice like comes out of that story, or like what advice are you trying to share through that story for parents who might be reading this to their child or their kid?
To validate the feelings that they feel overwhelmed, and here are ways to deal with it. What a lot of kids don't have are tools, and they need tools to find relief. Just how can they work with their emotions in a way where they're just not overloaded all the time by them and not crying all the time. She was crying a lot. Like her brothers and sisters wouldn't play with her because she was crying all the time. And they complained of that to the mother, that you cry all the time. I don't want to play with you. And that hurts, as a child, that really hurts. But then again, the child, Aurora, needed to have strategies on what to do. And she needed to feel loved, and she needed to feel not judged by her family. And her mother wasn't judging her, but she was just afraid she was overly sensitive and wanted to help her in some way, but that wasn't the way to do it. And so it wasn't until a big storm came in the story. A big storm came, and the Aurora's family lost their burrow, and she was just devastated. And so she goes out in the desert, and little by little, she meets different desert animals who give her tips on how to handle this and how to be sensitive and when to talk to a friend, how one would be a friend for them. A beautiful javelina, which is a wild boar, basically. People don't know what the javelina is, unless they live in the Sonoran Desert, which is south of Tucson. And I've been there, and I'm very fond of javelinas, but the javelinas are different. They're not like everybody else. And the javelina, became her friend, and she was able to accept her. And she said, sometimes I'll go look up at the moon with my friend, the javelina, and sometimes I'll go look up at the moon by myself. And javelina understands that. And so it's the freedom to be alone or not to be alone, and have friends that understand that, and not take it personally like you're rejecting them if you don't want to be with them.
Yeah, I love that. It's like finding your tribe, finding somebody who's willing to accept you for who you are, or at least, steer you in the right path with their support and their love.
Right. That's important. And when highly sensitive children get that kind of support, it makes a world of difference in terms of their feeling of safety, as opposed to everyone judging them and calling them names and maybe they should change. And here you have someone who accepts you and said, I accept you as you are, and you're beautiful as you are, and be alone or not be alone. I'm not taking it personally. I accept you as you are, and you're perfect as you are. And so that gives the child, a sensitive child, a lot of freedom, as opposed to feeling there's something wrong with them.
And when you mention freedom, I think part of that is the freedom to create boundaries, appropriate boundaries. That was the word you mentioned earlier, and I think that's really important to talk about. So, what role do boundaries play for highly sensitive children?
A big role. You can't get away with not doing it. And sometimes it's hard for children to set boundaries. It's sometimes hard for adults to set boundaries because they're afraid that people won't like them, or won't understand, or they'll be rejected. But it's the way you say it, and people have to be trained, and children have to be trained how to set a boundary in a loving way, so that people don't feel rejected. And it's just important to say something like, "No, I'm so sorry, I can't do that today because I feel tired. I need to go home and rest." And you say it in a way that with a loving tone, but it's a no, it's a positive no, as opposed to a negative or mean no.
What kind of,
Go ahead.
I was just going to ask, what kind of boundaries could a younger child put together? Like, I guess I'm thinking of like children who are like 6 or 7, depending on their, verbal capabilities. Some might be able to put together, a really cohesive thought, like very intuitive, being well in tune with their feelings to be able to say, no, I need some space because of X, Y, and Z. But if they're not quite as in tune, and maybe they have a harder time figuring out why they feel bad, but they know that if it goes away, they'll feel better. What kind of words or what kind of phrases can we give them to help them set a boundary in a way that's kind of like appropriate or like cognitively appropriate for them?
Well, if all else fails, let's say they're not able to set a boundary, they can excuse themselves and go to the bathroom. And adults use that technique too. And like if they're at a party and things are getting overwhelmed, when all else fails, go to the bathroom and close the door and recenter yourself. So give yourself permission to do that. If you can't think of what to say in the moment, but it's good to rehearse certain things with the parents, where there's a kid at school, he tells me all his problems. That's, sensitive children get that, where everybody tells them their problems. And it's okay to say, I have to go. It's okay to say, I'll think good thoughts about you, but I've got to go. That's all right. You can say that and be nice to somebody. But communicate, there is a limit to this, because if sensitive children and people have like an invisible sign around them that says, I can help you. And it's people spot it from far and wide. And so you have to be able to catch that and nip it in the bud. Otherwise, they're all over. They come from everywhere.
I am terrible at this. That's why I'm like laughing so bad because I can't get out of those situations. I don't know how to. I just like panic.
Yeah, you panic. But
Yeah.
you need to be able to get out of it, because otherwise you'll be exhausted. You only have so much energy, and you need to put it towards your loved ones or wherever you want, toward yourself, toward taking a walk in the woods and letting your mind wander and writing journals. You want to do that. And if people are coming out of the woodwork, they're going to drain you just because you only have so much energy. And I know you want to help, but you have to learn to smile at them and say, I'm so sorry you're going through this. I'll think good thoughts about you, rather than listen to the gory details from A to Z. After an hour, you're just like a limp noodle, and they're feeling better, by the way. They're all revved up because they feel understood. So you have to be able to do that. People, when in airports, that's part of my gripe there, is that people always come up to me and want to talk to me and tell me about their life story or what's going on. And I try and wall myself off. I put my purse around the seats and all kinds of things. And they still try and broach the boundary. But I've come to, I've learned to say, this is my time to be quiet, and I really appreciate it if you could honor that.
Yeah, I still struggle with that. So
It's
I'm working on it.
go to practice with your husband. He's very nice presence. Practice with him.
So let's talk about the parents and what they can do, right? So you have The Highly Sensitive Rabbit. It seems like a really useful book. I'm looking forward to reading it. So how can that book help parents and children embrace that sensitivity as a gift rather than a challenge?
Yes, well, number one, don't call your kids overly sensitive. I think that's one message that can get across to everyone today, that's not, it might come from your heart, but it's not the right thing to say to them. You could say they're sensitive and I want to help you with this, with your sensitivity, so we could come up with, things to do and ways to help you calm down if you're having a tantrum and you're feeling overwhelmed. This is what you can do, and you could practice it, and you don't have to be perfect. You can just practice it, see how it goes. We can talk about it and kind of find a way for the child to begin to do it on his or her own. Do you like the rainbows in my house?
It's very nice. I feel like, one of those parties that I wasn't able to go to.
It is. You're right.
Um, so what would you say to the parents who are raising an autistic or highly sensitive kid who worry that their child's sensitivity might end up holding them back?
Mm-hmm. Well, worry never gets you anywhere. It's something we all do, but it doesn't help anything. You want to look at what is working in the situation. And you want to look at what you can support in the child that's helpful. And you don't want to look at the child like, oh my God, if they don't, change this or do that, I don't know what's going to happen. They're not going to get anywhere, and that, we talked earlier about the negative thoughts in one's head, to be able for the parent to take control of those thoughts and bring yourself back to the moment and not thinking. I mean, you can worry about anything, and maybe there's a little truth in your worry, which makes it even worse, but you have to look and have faith in the child. And you have to look at what the child wants and how the child functions, and know with every fiber of your being, you're going to help that child as the best you can find the right path for them. And that's what you can do. Worrying about what's going to happen in the future is fruitless. Everybody does it, but I'm just telling you in case you can listen and hear this, it's just not going to help anything. But what will help is that in those moments of anxiety, if the parents get anxious about something about the child, bring yourself back. That's where you have to do the work on yourself. Bring yourself back and center yourself and have the micro moment, as I call it. Have the micro moment with yourself to get more centered so you can deal with whatever is happening now and try and solve any issues that are happening now. With the help of the child, you want to find out what's going on in them if they can articulate it. No, and especially if they're overstimulated. That's a really common problem. What do you do if they're tantruming or yelling or maybe biting or, just out of control? You want to help them get control back. However you can do that, tell them to take a breath. And also a secret to parenting a highly sensitive child is they do what you do. If you can center yourself and you can get together, then they'll model that. All right. If you're all over the place and yelling and screaming or frustrated, and showing it to them, that's what they're going to do too. So
Yeah. We've absolutely learned that with our kids. You have the first kid, and when they fall and scrape their knee, you freak out, and then they freak out. And now we've learned whenever they fall, we just look quietly and we don't say anything. And they look at you and they're like, okay, I guess I'm okay. And then they're fine. They're fine. So yeah, I've definitely learned that. So I wanted to ask you, we ask everybody on the show the question. Our podcast is called Embracing Autism, and the concept of embracing autism means something a little bit different for everyone. So I just wanted to ask you, from your personal experience, what does the concept of embracing autism mean to you?
It means embracing your unique self, whatever it may be, and beginning to love that and appreciate it and realize that there are obstacles or realize that there are challenges. But don't be too frightened about the challenges. Just take them one by one and try and deal with it in a doable way. And it's like embracing anything. It's embracing yourself and embracing, if you're a child, and embracing your child and not telling them they're overly this or overly that. They're who they are. This is who they are, and this is their beautiful spirit. And so you want to help that spirit along the way. And you do your best. Sometimes there'll be limitations, but that's okay. That's life. You do the best you can, and that's enough. That's how I feel. It's a powerful subject.
Yeah, absolutely. We're big fans of embracing and encouraging who they are and just making them the biggest them they can be, the best them they can be, rather than comparing to other children or other people and aspiring to meet someone else's goals.
Right.
So before we wrap up, give us all the details. Where can our listeners find the Highly Sensitive Rabbit and connect with your work? When does that come out? Everything you know.
Yes. Well, my website, if you'd like to connect with me and find the book, it's drjudithorloff.com, ORLOFF.com. And the book is available for pre-order now. It's September now, and you'll get the book delivered to you October 7th. That's the pub date. So it's around on Amazon, any online bookseller, and any regular bookstore. And if they don't have it, you can always order it.
Excellent. And are you available on social media?
I am. I'm on Facebook, I'm on Twitter, I'm on Instagram, but I have an empath, highly sensitive person support group on Facebook. And so those who would like to mingle with others with similar responses, and it's a beautiful group. It's like 22,000 empaths, and it's just a wonderful group. So you can all join it. You can.
All right. For those of you on audio only, the social media accounts are Facebook at Dr. Judith Orloff, X at Dr. Judith Orloff MD, and Instagram is judith.orloff.md. Orloff is ORLOFF. And her website is drjudithorloff.com. Thank you so much, Dr. Orloff, for joining me today and sharing such an encouraging perspective on raising our sensitive kiddos.
You're very welcome. It's been great.
Absolutely. For those of you out there, please do check out her new children's book, The Highly Sensitive Rabbit. You'll find all the spots on her website, so please stay tuned for that. And as always, thank you for listening. I'll see y'all next time. Bye.